So welcome everybody to today's show on charting your course. So I'm just getting a bit of feedback here, so just bear with me. Okay, I think I've got this too close. So today, Andrew won't be joining us. He's been getting downloaded a lot since our workshop. It was an amazing workshop last weekend, and he's still getting downloaded with a lot of new information since he opened up that portal. And so he won't be joining us today, and Kathy won't be joining us today, but I would like to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Dawn Mazer, and both of us are going to be talking about the mineral kingdom and the crystal skulls. And so, Dawn, I'd like to welcome you and introduce you to everybody.
Hello, everyone. This is Dawn, and I'm glad to be here today. We wanted to talk to you today because Debbie and I have been working for a long time on direct communication with the mineral kingdom, which is definitely a form of consciousness that uses crystalline structures to hold its information. These bones of the earth are stones and rocks that create our mountains and underlie all of our lands, can be formed through carving into shapes that resemble our cranium. And it's interesting when you're holding a stone, the bone of the earth, that matches the bones of your skull, how easy communication can be between you and the mineral kingdom.
It's absolutely awesome. And I had a lot of people approach me at the Living Your Mystical Life Daily and said how inspired they were about hearing me working with him, she at the time. And so I really was very honoured and blessed to meet every one of you that came up to me, had a wonderful time there. And so that's what inspired us to talk about the crystal skull and the mineral kingdom today, so that we could give you a deeper understanding of how we work with those and why they've now been presented into our life.
You know, Debbie, I bet there are people here listening on the show that have never listened to that interview with you about him, she. Maybe you should say a few words about how you work with him, she, how you found him, she, and what a companion he's been to you in your travels.
I did talk about him on my last show.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was through listening to you talking about him, she, that got me over my sort of revulsion, because I believe that a skull represented a dead human. And to me, a crystal skull was some sort of macabre type of a carving that represented death. And I had refused to allow myself to really ever hold one or look at it or come in contact, even though I'd had opportunities to meet some very famous skulls that have been upturned and found in ancient temples and are marvelous transmitters of wisdom. I just couldn't allow myself to do it. So after hearing Debbie talk about him, she, in an interview that she did a little over a year ago, I suddenly had an absolute passion to find one for myself. And I was so excited. I went out the very next day. I had no idea where to locate them. And I intended to drive to a nearby town where I'd bought regular crystals and see if anyone knew where I could get a crystal skull. And on the way, there was an exit on the freeway, and I just suddenly knew that exit, there was something for me. So I took the exit, I drove down the road, and I was looking all around with my eyes, trying to find what was calling me. And I thought it might be in some sort of a crystal shop, but I wasn't sure. And I parked the car at a place where there seemed to be parking in the downtown area of this very small, out-of-the-way town called Morro Bay in California, and walked up and down the street saying to people, "Do you know if there's a crystal shop?" And no one really knew, and I walked back to my car feeling kind of dejected, and something drew my eye right beside my car where I had parked. There was a small sign that said that there was a crystal shop. It was closed that day, but I walked down the hall and peered through the window, and there were crystal skulls. And pretty much that was all she wrote. The very next day that it was open, I went, and one of the skulls called to me, And I'd slept with it every night for 2 or 3 months and developed a very strong, loving relationship with my very first skull.
I know you shared that with me, and I thought it was an amazing story. The fact that it was already activated and was already sharing information with you through that dream state too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting thing about crystal skulls. There are some crystal skull carvers that are very, very famous, and they're known for being multidimensional human beings that work with consciousnesses that would like to come in and take up residence in a skull. And these carvers literally make the bodies for these beings. And my first skull was carved by such a man who lives in Brazil named Leandro Souza. And you can find his skulls if you look on Google search or something. You can find them for sale. And they're more than other skulls because they're all activated and they all have amazing beings in them. Or you can find a skull that perhaps is connected to a consciousness, but that consciousness has not been able to become fully born or fully forward into that skull, much like a human baby fetus might be in the dream world and isn't really fully here until they're born.
I know that was an amazing experience that I've had too, connecting with these crystal skulls. And there was a time just not so long ago that I went down to visit Dawn in California, and she had emailed me that there was a specific famous crystal skull that was coming to her little town, and was I interested in coming down and joining her for that weekend. And I was, I tuned in and I was really drawn to go, so that I made the effort to go down there, and she offered to let me stay with her. And we had a most amazing weekend with those skulls. And I'd like to share one of the experiences that I had while I was there. I had been, I've been sitting on this one for several weeks now, and just integrating that experience because it was so amazing to me, the way it unfolded. And what had happened was one of the crystal skulls was named Ophelia, a beautiful, beautiful skull. And at the end of that presentation, the person who has that skull, she's a wonderful shaman, and she decided that she was going to, at the end of the presentation, give us a meditation. And the meditation was just calling in all the ancestors, and then just had the music going and letting us sit with that experience and with the energies. And everybody who was there were into the crystal skulls and had put their crystal skulls around Ophelia. And so you could really feel the frequency, spreading out. And as I was sitting there with my eyes closed, and I just felt myself just drift into the void, I saw something coming really slowly towards me. And as I was looking closer and closer at it, it was getting clearer and clearer and larger and larger. All of a sudden I saw this beautiful crystal skull sitting in front of me. And I said, "Are you Ophelia, showing yourself to me?" And I got the answer was, "No, I'm a crystal skull that's coming to you, and I'm going to be working with you on other worlds and in the celestial realms." And so it's more outer worldly experiences, because a lot of the regressions that I've been doing lately have been off-world. And so she's been working with me more on this plane. And this skull told me it was going to come to me to assist me to work with more off-world experiences. So as I was looking at this crystal skull really clearly, I was thinking, how is this going to come to me? And so I was looking very clearly because she was showing herself to me, and it was very opaque, milky coloured crystal, which I'd never seen in a crystal skull before in this way. And as certain lights hit it, I saw little rainbow colours coming off it. And I wasn't too sure whether it was more opalescent, what exactly it was, but I just took a really, really good look. And then she disappeared. And so I explained, and after it all finished, I just was blown away. And I mentioned to my friend Dawn here, I just had this amazing experience. I've got a crystal skull that's going to come to me. I don't know how or where or when, but it's already showed itself to me, so I will recognize it. And where this crystal where these crystal skulls were, where we were sitting, was a big crystal store right next to it. And so after everything had finished, I walked into the crystal shop, and I was looking around, and there was no crystal skulls there that looked anything like what I saw in the void. And so I just thought, oh well, somehow, I know that I'll just keep an eye out. And then I got this real inner intuition draw to text a friend of mine who lives in Mount Shasta, and she does trade shows. She sells crystals, and sometimes she has crystal skulls. And so I just texted her on the off chance that if she was going to go to Tucson to any of the trade shows, you should keep an eye out for me on this particular type of skull. And I explained it to her in detail of what I saw and how it came to me. And she texted me back about a day later going, "Oh my God, Debbie, I just can't believe what you described to me." She said, "That is a very, very rare type of a crystal, and you very rarely see it in a crystal skull." And she said, "But I do have one, but it's mine." And I'm like, oh. And she said, "But I think I might have its mate. I'm not too sure." She said, "I'm away at a trade show. When I get back, I'll let you know." So when she got back, I finally contacted her, and she said to me, "Debbie, I still am absolutely blown away by what you told me." And she said, "But I do have the mate here. She's been sitting on my altar for the last 2 years." And she said, "I remember now purchasing the male and the female, these 2 crystal skulls, and the male one told her that it was to stay with her on her altar, but she was going to sell the other one in her mind. And when she picked up the female one, it said, 'No, I need to sit on your altar.' She said, 'But I always knew it wasn't for me. It was going to go to somebody,' but she never knew who. And she realized that this was the crystal skull that I had described, and it's a metamorphosis type of a crystal, and it's opalescent. It has a little black tourmaline markings on one side of it. It glows in a certain light. When the sun hits it, I get little rainbows off her. She's a really, really powerful energy, and so she sent that to me, and so that's what I have manifested today. And so I just wanted to share that little experience about how these beings and these consciousness can actually find their way to you, or when you see one, how you will recognize that consciousness and how it will work with you.
So maybe it's good to just give another idea of how you might have one of these come into your life. Once I had my first crystal skull, I was in love. And I began to find myself being addressed energetically by other crystal skulls. I'm clairvoyant, that means I can see energy, but I'm not clairaudient. That means rarely can I hear in a multidimensional way. But I can certainly feel, and I can feel crystal skulls when they say hello to me. And so when Debbie got the vision and the call from Seraphina saying that she was coming, I could feel inside that I had a longing for a connection to a new skull, but I couldn't, I didn't know where it might come from. And I actually ended up on eBay. And I'm sifting through all the various skulls, and I came to this one picture, and I just knew this was it. So I bought it, and it was mailed to me from China. And when it came, it wasn't what was described. It was what was in the picture, but it had been described as a skull carved by the famous Leandro Souza, and it just wasn't that. I know I have enough of them now that I can recognize some of the carvers. So I contacted the seller, and I said, I think you misadvertised this. And the seller was very kind and said, "No problem, just send it right back." So I got her all boxed up, and all of a sudden I found I could not mail that box back. And I pulled her out and looked at her, and I just thought, I don't know what this is, but I obviously, energetically, this feels like it's to come with me to Andrew's weekend retreat, Living the Mystical Life Daily, and afterwards on a sort of a trip to Mount Rainier, a trip to Mount Shasta, where I'm going to meet with the Keros elders from the Andes, and they also initiate crystal skulls. So I brought her, even though she felt empty to me, like there was no one home. And in my travels, I came into contact with a young lady who's quite amazing. She's one of the wonderful new children, I guess, that are being born to us. She's about 19 years old now, so she's not that much of a child. But she's very aware of herself, and she's had a lot of challenges coming into her body because she comes from such a high frequency. And it turns out that this skull is from the same soul family that she's from. And so she was able to bring it fully into this skull. And since then, this beautiful being, who is called Light Ray now, has come to me in dreams and has actually been able to open portals for me to allow me to have direct connection to the central sun in this universe. And that's wonderful because the central sun has offered me some help in my meditations and has answered some of my prayer requests. But without the skull acting as an intermediary to open a direct portal, I don't think the communications would be this easy at all. So crystal skulls can come in many ways. This is an example of one that came to me without her personality or her beingness fully in the crystal yet. She was still out dreaming as a universal being. So she now has a body here that's in this form of this beautiful crystal skull.
And that's a wonderful story, Dawn. And I happened to be here when that happened, and that skull was actually activated beautifully, and the connection was made. And at that same, when I had that same experience with Seraphina, when she came and showed herself to me in the void when I was down there with Dawn at this crystal skull weekend. One another crystal skull that I had gotten in Shasta that I was just drawn to, and it was a Numite, and it's a little black skull, and it's been sitting on my dresser probably now for about a year and a half, and I just never felt any activation or anything coming from this skull. And so I just thought, oh, well, I'll just let it sit there. I really liked the frequency from the stone, but felt like there was no one home. And it also showed itself to me after Seraphina had told me that she was coming. It all of a sudden started coming out of the void to me and said, now I'm going to be ready to start working with you. And so I brought him out. It feels like a very strong male figure or consciousness. And it was activated on the same time as Light Ray. And it was told it was a very, very, very old being, and it was just taking its time to come through. It was waiting for the right time, for the type of work and the type of consciousness that we're moving into right now. It's a very important time that we need to start opening up and accessing the mineral kingdom to assist us to work through these times, to open up and fire the consciousness and bring us into more awareness and more alignment with the energies.
Absolutely. And you know, perhaps this is a good time to mention that if you are considering this and you do either get a crystal skull in the mail, if you're in a small town and there aren't any offered, you can't go experience them in person. You can get onto eBay or some other sites like I did to find Light Ray. Or if you get to meet your skull in person before deciding if you're going to bring it home, you need to pay attention to all of your intuition, because crystals can be impressed with many types of energies. And Debbie and I had the experience of being at that weekend that she mentioned, and the other famous skull that was there had spent years under military testing to see what it could do and what frequencies it had. And we found that there had been some energies impressed into it that weren't particularly positive. So pay attention as you meet something that is any kind of stone that you want to bring into your life, to your inner feeling. You'll know if you feel happy and excited and interested in the stone, or if you feel a sense of uncomfort around it. If you do feel a sense of uncomfort, just be aware that these beautiful stones can be impressed by other consciousnesses and can sometimes end up carrying energies that might not match yours.
That's true. And also, I had another crystal skull that I was drawn to get, and it's a crystal from Tibet, and this beautiful, bright young spark, 19-year-old. I asked her if she could hold it and see what she could feel, if there was any consciousness that needed activating, because I didn't feel it was really activated as well. And so we had a whole night doing crystal skull work, and it was so much fun. But she also picked up that there was some dark imprint, obviously maybe from the people who'd handled her in the shipping or whatever, and had imprinted some darkness. And so what she suggested to me is to actually put this crystal skull into some Himalayan salt water, and I let it sit there for possibly about an hour so it could dissipate some of the darkness that had been imprinted in it. And so when she put it back in her hand, she said it had gone. And so then left it open for us to imprint some of our type of work that we want to do in consciousness with these consciousness as well, because these also can take on an imprint, or like for different people have different types of work that they do, and we all need to work with our intuition. And so we can also ask and put our intent there, saying, these are the type of energies that I want to work with you, can you assist me with that? And so we can open that aspect up of the consciousness of the crystal skull to whether it'll work with us with certain energies, with certain things that are going on. I know with Himshi, when I've been working with my past life regression work, Himshi's been a major support and a sentinel there for protection, but also every now and again sends me little messages that'll just take it just to another level when I'm working with my with people. So it's just be aware that there can be some dark imprints, but you can cleanse them. You can sit them out in the sun. I actually every now and again take my skulls and my crystals and sit them out onto my land and let them absorb and ground the energies on my land, so that we can all be in harmony together with the same type of consciousness and the energy that we work with. Also, you can take them to the fire. And when you're doing, if you want to do fire ceremony and saging, there's lots of different ways where we can clear our crystals and our skulls and work with the minerals.
It's interesting that you talk about that, because I think that whether you are working with a mineral kingdom that has been hand-carved, like crystal skulls, or is more natural, like a crystal point, although many of them now have been polished to the point where their original shape is gone, so many of what looks like a crystal point have been interfered with. It's definitely the minority of crystals that are sold which have not been fooled with it, in my experience. But anyway, when you're working with the mineral kingdom, even a rock that you pick up that seems to have special energy for you, it's very good once in a while to sit them around the fire and treat them like a person. And because I have clairvoyance, I can see very clearly energies, I've been fascinated to realize that my skulls will sit politely around the fire, and until I introduce them to the fire with my voice and give the skulls permission to release into the fire, often they will hold on to any heavy energies that they've picked up in clearing my house or in clearing me or any healing client I might have. They will hold on to those energies somehow until I have the intention of allowing them to release, and I ask them to do it. And then I can actually see those heavy dark energies going into the fire and the fire transmuting them. I've also taken them into wild streams and set them in the water, and even into the ocean. I live near the ocean, so I take my skulls with me and set them in the waves. And even setting them on a bed of salt is another really good way to help the crystals be able to release any heavy energies that they'd like to clear themselves up. Because just like people do, we live in a world with a lot of various kinds of energies, many of which aren't necessarily compatible with us. And the same thing happens with the crystals. And they greatly appreciate attention being given to them to help them clear themselves.
Also, I've noticed when I'm going to go on in a sacred journey, like to a sacred site, and so Dawn's had the same experience, I set my crystals and my crystal skulls in front of me, and I ask who wants to come with me. And you really get a strong signal which ones want to come and which ones
sure
don't.
Do.
Yes. and it's just wonderful. And so I know some people, I think with you, Dawn, a lot of yours want to come with you. And so what we found that we can't, if depending on how many you've got and what size they are or whatever, that you can just choose the ones that come to you the strongest and take those. And when they come back, they can actually imprint the other ones in their energy, so they can share their information and knowledge. The amazing thing that I've noticed, Dawn, when we put our crystal skulls together, all the ones that were pretty clear that you could see through, I started to notice that the veils were starting to build up inside them, or like little lines of almost looks like little, what would you call them? It's like brains growing to me inside them.
Yes, it can look like that. Yes,
it's like little streams of information are impregnating into the consciousness, into the crystal, into these skulls, and you can see that they're expanding the wisdom that's going on in there as well, and they're taking on, because they all connect with each other. Once they're connected, they download whatever their experiences are into each other, which is just an amazing to watch and actually look at your crystal skulls every day and see how much more they're filled up.
It seems as though each skull has an idea for what it wants its journey to be and what its intention is.
We have an ad coming up, commercial coming up, so we'll be back with you shortly. Just keep that in mind though, Dawn. We'll keep going with that. So welcome back, everybody, to Charting Your Course. We're just having a wonderful talk here with Dawn Mazer, Debbie Smart, myself. Andrew is not here today, as I mentioned before. He's giving himself the space because he's receiving a lot of streams and downloads at the moment, and so he just opened it up for us to do the show today. But if anybody's interested in having a reading with Andrew, you can contact him on andrewbartzis.com. And also, we can organise a reading with him through Tanash at galactichistorian.com. If anybody wants to have a past life regression with me, you can also contact me and through Tanash at galactichistorian.com and organise a session. And so we're going to get back to the crystal skulls that we're talking about and the mineral kingdom and how they work with us in our daily life, and how the wonderful experiences that they've given us to this date. So Dawn, I know that we were talking, and so we just sort of got into midstream about what we're talking about, so I'm just going to open it back up to you, and so we can just carry on from there.
Okay. So I had a very, very interesting summer this year, and part of my summer was to go to the Maya lands. And I ended up starting in Guatemala and then going to Honduras, where the Copan Valley exists, and where there are so many temples. Honestly, I can't remember. It's thousands. They know they're never going to be able to dig most of these up, but they have been working for the last 50 years on an ancient stone library in the Copan Valley, which is just a few minutes from the little town of Copan in Honduras. And what's fascinating is to go into this stone library and actually have movies played for you in full living color in your mind, or very clear voices talk to you, or suddenly have psychic surgery be done on your body to repair something. And in the Copan Valley, in this very ancient site, there is what's called the Mother Skull. And she is huge. Let's see, I'm guessing she's around perhaps 4 or 5 feet tall, and perhaps 6 by 6 feet, if you can imagine a huge stone like that. And when I went there, we had Ophelia, the crystal skull, with the group of shamans I went with. And the Mother Skull began interacting with Ophelia, and I could see lines of light going between them. And afterwards, Ophelia was given the task of bringing certain frequencies into the DNA blueprint for all the human beings that were on that tour. So it was interesting to actually see a crystal skull depicted in such a huge form as a mother skull. And you've been there too, haven't you, Debbie?
It's one of my favorite places. The energy and the frequencies there just blow my mind. But when you're standing in front of the stellars, the downloads of information from those libraries that those beings left for us were just incredible.
So that brings me back to wanting to talk a little bit about these modern skulls. If you're listening, the chances of you happening to be offered one of these skulls that was carved, 10,000 years ago are pretty slender. There might be a lot of them, but only a certain number have been found. But the chances of you being able to get one of the more modern skulls are really easy if you choose to do this. And my intention with my skulls, besides my understanding that they each have come with their own agenda of what they want to do while they're here in their skull. But besides that, my intention is to leave a record for the next generations of what I have done in my life, so that if they find any of the skulls that I have worked with and spent time with, they can read them by holding them, and through psychometry, through the skulls directly transmitting frequencies, they can discover the messages of becoming sovereign and living through this time of change on Earth that I'm leaving behind in these stone beings.
The wonderful thing also that I've experienced, especially with Seraphina, that she comes to me in my dream world. And she came to me before she got sent to me, after I got told that she was coming, and I found out that my friend in Mount Shasta had her and had her on her altar and had been sitting there for 2 years for the right person. She came to me in my dream and told me what she wanted to be called, and that was Seraphina. And I'd never really heard of, like, seraphim was what stuck out with me. And I had contacted you, Dawn, and I said, I think the name that I got in my dream the other night was Seraphina, but also I've heard the term seraphim from somewhere, so you Google it.
Right? It was, oh boy, that's a word with an interesting history. So here's a skull that came in and chose her own name.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And it's got an angelic. It's got an angelic background to it. The word seraphim was attached to angels. And it was interesting that she had told me that she was coming to work with me with celestial energies and off-world energies more, to assist me with that degree and that going into other dimensions. And so I thought, well, the name Seraphina really, really fitted what she was going to be here for.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I actually learned this week about skulls was from this lovely 19-year-old little girl or woman girl that I met this weekend. And she actually had an explanation when she worked with Light Ray, the skull that completely became initiated right in her hands. And what she saw very clearly was that Light Ray had shown her that a number of skulls here on the planet have been carved for her to be able to come into. But she had her main consciousness with the central sun, where she lives in community there with beings that are in direct contact. And she had a choice of which skull to bring the main portion of the consciousness that she wants to work with here on Earth, which skull of the many she was going to primarily be coming into. And doesn't mean that part of her consciousness, a little spark of it, is not in these other skulls, but because she was initiated by this young woman who was in the same soul family, she made the decision to be primarily in this particular skull and to stay with me during my travels. So, you know, that's interesting to get a little window into these skulls as beings and how they operate. They really are a beautiful form of consciousness with their very own way of being.
And the different types of skulls that you can get with the different types of gems, because you've got an array of different types of gems that they're in, and so it creates a different frequency, but it's still a very similar consciousness in some way. How do you find that?
Well, you know, I have many skulls. Not everybody will have this experience, but I think I might have as many as 50, perhaps, or maybe a little more. And many of them are not completely initiated yet, but does not mean that I don't work with them and talk with them and touch them with my hands and bring them to the fire. But I have many, many gems in the form of skulls and many, many colors. And since the skulls seem to operate using light as a frequency that I can see, what I notice is that the type of gem or crystalline rock that they have chosen to come into makes a difference in how they communicate, because it affects the color of the light which they stream and work with. There are skulls that change color. For example, Ophelia, that we've mentioned earlier, who lives in Morro Bay with her keeper. That's what a person that has a crystal skull is called, a skull keeper. We become the arms and the feet and the legs for the crystal skulls, because in this 3D world, they don't have a body where they can move themselves. And so they work with keepers, and slowly we develop a bond with them, and then they can let us know when they would like to go someplace. And we have the ability to say yes or no to those requests. And they have the ability also to ask to be moved to another keeper if they're living with somebody that doesn't match what their plans are for their life. But anyway, Ophelia is highly conscious, and she does direct healing sessions, and they are very intense and strong. There's no question that Ophelia is there as a consciousness. She is highly felt. But Ophelia also has the ability to cry real saltwater tears right out of the stone. She's a clear quartz skull. And when she works to clear lakes and oceans and rivers, which she likes doing, she turns a deep aqua blue. And then later she'll turn back to her natural clear quartz crystalline color. So the stones can, with the consciousness that comes into them, can be used to change colors and to do different types of work.
That's a wonderful thing that I experienced. I did have a session with her too, and it is wonderful. Also, I think I mentioned once before on a radio show, or it might have been a video that I was on with Andrew, an experience that I had up in Mount Shasta, where I met a crystal skull, a very large crystal skull. It weighed about 16 pounds, with this young lady who was a shaman who had been given this crystal skull, and that used to belong to John of God. And she holds amazing fire ceremonies on full moons and equinoxes, and creates a whole balancing of everybody's energies and releasing into the fire any negative energies. And this John of God's, the crystal skull there, seems to create a whole portal around this ceremony, and I got to experience that. I found it very, very powerful. It was a lovely experience, and she does that in California, different places, and sometimes in Mount Shasta, where I was lucky enough to, or fortunate enough to meet and have that experience. And so the crystal skulls choose the different things and different ways that they want to work with people. And so if you're a crystal skull keeper or drawn to do that, and you'll start to tune in and see where your crystal skull and how that consciousness wants to work with you and assist you in the type of healing work or the different types of work that you feel that you're drawn to do, spiritual work. And there was another one that, another experience that I had with the John of God too. She does also a lot of healing sessions with people as well. And that crystal skull, because John of God takes a lot of the negative energies and heals people's bodies. And this crystal skull worked with John of God, and also she does private sessions with that as well, pulling out the negative energies that create illnesses in the body or imprints out of the body with that. And it's just amazing, but just allow yourself to stay open and trust your intuition and your knowingness about whether this is for you or not for you. But it's also very fascinating to listen to other people and their experiences. I went to see the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull when he was here just several months ago in Washington. And I took my daughter, who hadn't been really that interested in crystal skulls prior to that, even though I was trying to tell her how excited I was with mine. She was just in another little world of her life at that time. So she agreed to come with me. And when we were sitting in there waiting for the crystal skull to be brought in by Bill, he's the keeper, and she was sitting on, I gave her the aisle seat, more second row back, so that she could, be close and experience the energies even more at a closer range. even though that frequency of the Mitchell Hedges skull fills up the whole room. It's just the most amazing crystal skull. Anyway, Colette was there sitting there talking to me with her face away from the crystal skull, and she hadn't noticed that it had been put down, the Mitchell Hedges, and all of a sudden she just was looking at me and she goes, "Oh my gosh, I just feel really hot. One side of my body, I feel this incredible heat." And I saw one side of her face turning red. And I just said to her, "Now turn to your right." And when she turned to her right, she saw the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull facing towards her. Bill had sort of shifted it towards where we were sitting, and this great wave of heat just came across, and she felt it without even seeing it. And that was how that really blew her away, and that opened her up to how powerful these crystal skulls can be and what type of work they do. And the Mitchell Hedges one is here basically to bring peace and loving energy out to the people, to open people's consciousness up to realize that it's multidimensional and that we can work on all different levels and multi-dimensions with our healing work, with our intuition, all the different aspects of life that we can actually engage in with helping.
Right. And since we're multidimensional beings, only in this 3D dimension do these amazing consciousnesses just look like a stone skull. In the other dimensions, they have full bodies. And so since we're multidimensional, once you develop a relationship with one of these beings, they become allies for you in other dimensions. And I really want to swing into sort of an interesting topic that's directly related to this, but not exactly the same. And that is that Debbie has, and Ophelia's keeper have, actual stone rocks that have never been carved, that each one of these has said to us, "I am a stone skull." And in each case, we have picked them up and we treat them just as though they are a carved crystalline skull, because we understand that there's a consciousness that can come through that stone and work with us. And furthermore, that consciousness chose us because it's sort of called out. So you know how you're moved to perhaps pick up stones, and you have been since you were a little child? Well, I think this is natural for all of us, and I believe most stones have a form of consciousness, whatever it is, that they carry with them, as well as part of the Akashic record, or even the whole Akashic record, because it exists through all the crystalline forms on the planet, in all the spaces between the crystals and throughout the mineral kingdom. And it's actually the stone records that Andrew, partly at least, has been able to learn to read. I'm not sure if everything he reads comes from them, but they hold the history of the earth. So it might make you take a second look at some of the plain old rocks that you've been attracted to, and you're not sure why. Perhaps there really is something in there trying to communicate to you. And Debbie, how would you recommend people that haven't really done this before start to get in touch with that kind of consciousness?
Well, it's interesting how that does open up to you, because when I first started picking up stones and rocks is when I started going to sacred sites, and I recognized that everything is a frequency, everything carries a frequency. And the more that I spiritually grew from my experiences at these different sites and everything, I picked up a rock and brought it back, and I could actually tune in and feel the frequency of those stones and realize that these carry encoded information. So not just crystal, skulls are carrying codes of information, but rocks and plants and bark and even the soil. When you stand there with your feet, you can actually tune into Mother Earth. Everything is encoded for each and every one of us to experience and to evolve with. But the rocks especially have been chosen over time, over the millennia, where all the different cultures that have come through time and space have engraved their messages into stone as well. So we see hieroglyphs and we see symbols carved into stone. I know that when I went to the Rosslyn Chapel, and I was very, very fortunate to go down into the crypt that had been closed for many years, but that just opened up the day that my group went in. And on the stone walls were carved all these different symbols. And what I felt, what the experience that I had in there, the portals opened up in there. and the frequencies that were coming through. So even as a person, we can actually carve in symbols into rocks, and I've seen it painted on rocks too, that people imprint the different symbols that can actually activate certain things and frequencies that are coming through the stones and the rocks. And so we need to be, fully aware that it's not just one thing, that there's many things that brings information and codes of light and information to us to learn and grow from. Even flowers that we bring into from the garden and we bring into our home, we can feel it light up the room. We can feel the frequency that we can tune in, the love frequency from a rose. I was very, very fortunate one time to sit in front of a rose that was put in front of me to do gazing into. I was attending a course, and everybody was doing soul contact, where you pick a partner and you'd sit opposite each other and you look into each other's eyes, and the eyes are the windows to the soul. And so people were sitting there and having, these different experiences being triggered through just gazing at each other's eyes. But I didn't have a partner, so just out of the blue, the person that was running it decided they'd just stick a flower in front of me, and it happened to be a red rose. The experience that I had from that red rose was so amazing that it brought me to my knees and to tears. I just saw this beautiful rose, the frequency, I just saw the auric field fill up the whole room with a golden energy, and the energy was so pure that it opened up my heart and humbled me so much that it just brought me to tears. So I realized that everything is a frequency. Everything is here for us to open us up, to experience the wisdom and the love and the growth and the spiritual experiences that we can have from the mineral kingdom.
Yes, and for me, a lot of my contact with crystals comes from a couple of ways. One is that I found that it's wonderful to fall asleep holding a stone or a crystal, and I frequently do that with my skulls. And I've met many of them for the first time in the dream world when doing that. And after that link is established, then I don't need to necessarily touch them for that to happen. I've also found that a good way to do it is just to assume there's somebody in there and keep talking to the rock. So I've actually usually bring a new skull to lunch with me. There's a special place I like to go where the trees hang over the tables of this little restaurant and make dappled shade. And I set the skull on the table with me and put a little tiny tea cup there in front of the skull. And I put food in it just as though the skull is sharing lunch with me. I figure there's energy in the food, and I'm making an offering to the being in the skull. And I chat away just as though I'm sitting with a person. And usually by the end of lunch, whatever consciousness is in that skull has come forward and is very present and has come out of the dream world and is more realizing that it's in the 3D world and it has a body here and it's able to bring a more focused consciousness. I think the first time maybe that that I consciously knew for sure that crystals or the mineral kingdom was communicating with me, I had bought some large crystals on the advice of a healer, and they were all from the Coleman mine in Arkansas, and I had them sitting in the living room because they were very pretty. And I didn't know quite what to do with them. They were too big to hold. They were just quartz crystal clusters. And I'd had them there for maybe 4 months. And I was sitting reading a book in the living room. And all of a sudden, to my extreme surprise, I had a full-on experience of being down inside the earth in a cave, filled with water, surrounded by crystals. And I was really surprised. I wasn't expecting that at all. And it took me a minute to realize, or for the crystals to get across to me, that they took me to meet their family. So that's our ad coming, and we'll talk to you after this break.
So welcome back, everybody, to Charting Your Course today with Dawn Mazer and Debbie Smart, myself. We'd like to thank you for coming and joining us today. Just want to mention that tomorrow Andrew will be back on show on Adventures into Reality between 11 and 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And also, if you wanted to have a session with Andrew, you can contact him through Tanash at galactichistorian.com to book a session with Andrew. You can also book a session with me for past life regression with Tanash at galactichistorian.com, or you can come onto my website and read about me if you've never heard about what I do on innerdimensionhypnotherapy.net. So I'd like to just open the show back up again with Dawn and myself in regards to the crystal skulls. So Dawn, I noticed that when we were at the workshop last week of Andrew's Living the Mystical Life Daily, getting a tongue tie there, that a lot of people did approach me with their crystal skulls. A lot of people turned up with their crystal skulls because they were moved and have had amazing experiences. And there's the particular ones that were shared stories with us about how that it changed their life, how that they were just walking through and never ever thought that they would want to own a crystal skull. They happened to be at a crystal trade fair or show, and how different ones called out to them and asked them to come and buy them and to work with them. So you came in contact with a lot of these people who had the crystal skulls there, right?
Well, it was interesting to go to this conference. As I mentioned, I have roughly about 50 of these that have called to me. And I was really shocked when about 25 of them wanted to come. I was really shocked. And I actually had to arrange, for a container to carry them. And most of them are small, but I have about 5 that came with me that are pretty good sized and pretty heavy. And so, sometimes with my shamanic nature, I feel a little foolish because I look around at the rest of the world and they're just very different than me. So I have to say that I was a little tongue-in-cheek coming to the conference. But when I got there, I got my skull family out who had wanted to come, and I set them all on the table in our hotel room. And I carry a small traveling fireplace that uses a sterno-type fuel, and I made a little fire for them. We did a little ceremony, and then we went out to meet the rest of the people for the weekend in this amazing event that Andrew Bartis put on. And that was when I began meeting people with skulls. And as soon as they heard I had a skull family, they all wanted to come to my room and have their skulls meet my skulls. So we ended up with a skull party happening in my room. And with my clairvoyance, I could see something like fireworks. There were so many light rays going back and forth between these skulls. It was incredible. Some people couldn't necessarily see, they don't have clairvoyance, but they could feel the strong vibration coming from this group of crystals, each one carved to be like a human skull and all communicating. And it was amazing. I brought a few of them each day to actually sit in the conference with me, and then brought them back at night. And so they would carry the frequencies to the rest of the group. And other people did the same. And I've never seen anything like it. And what was fascinating was to see the veils forming inside the crystal, inside the crystals themselves, as they picked up information and energy from each other and stored it in the form of well, I don't really know how to explain what a veil is. I guess you could imagine a light bridal veil, say, for example, on a woman that's going to get married traditionally. And if she sewed sparkles on every little part of it, the skulls get something like that inside their crystal structure. You can see them forming, and it's the particular way that they hold the information in their structure. And I have never seen veils form so quickly. I have skulls I brought to that room that were completely clear, almost like glass. They almost looked phony, they were so clear. And they're now filled with veils and rainbows and all kinds of shapes as new information has been stored. It's been really phenomenal.
I noticed with the frequency of Andrew's event, his workshop, Living the Mystical Life Daily, that the consciousness there was absolutely going through the roof. And I noticed that my 2 crystal skulls that I had brought with me, him, she, as well as Seraphina, were just absolutely vibrating from the consciousness that was being brought into through Andrew. And as the time went by and we're doing all the meditations with Andrew and going through all that information, the consciousness was being raised. The crystal skulls also, the frequency in the crystal skulls, you could feel the vibration actually, really vibrating. And the people who got together with their crystal skulls, I could see them so excited. They're all like, oh, we all got together with our crystal skulls, and the frequencies that were coming off them, it was just over the roof, wasn't it?
Yes. Everybody that was a skull keeper was incredibly excited by what they were experiencing through their connection with these, with the mineral kingdom and the consciousness that are working with these, the mineral kingdom that's been carved in the shape of skulls. And we weren't the only people that had skulls that were not carved. They were rocks that had said they were skulls. So some of those were also there on the table. And gosh, it was amazing.
And so I just, really encourage people, and I know a lot of people actually were carrying their own crystals on themselves because they also wanted those to be imprinted with the frequencies of the weekend, of the workshop, with the information and the consciousness that came together as one, which becomes very, very powerful. It's like, 1 to the power of 10. And so when you're bringing your crystal skulls, and I encourage people to bring their crystals and their skulls and their stones and whatever it is to these gatherings where the consciousness is being raised together, we can empower ourselves and empower those around us and send those frequencies out into the consciousness as a rippling effect for the whole the globe. And I noticed that, a meditation that we're doing, that I do at night too, as I was doing it, I could feel the power of it rippling all the way out. And I always present it all the way out into the galaxy, out into the universe, like our revocations that we do. And so I just find that this is a very, very powerful process, and it's a wonderful thing to bring along and work along with the mineral kingdom in consciousness.
And there were powerful people there that had much of the understanding we're talking about. There were people that there was a wonderful person that brought stones from a womb chakra that is awakening in Australia. And he actually took them out to the chakra, set them in the womb chakra and in the moonlight for the full moon and the new moon. And very, very powerful stones. And he brought an entire suitcase of them and gave them away, knowing that every person that took one of those stones and keeps it and honors it, those stones now are connecting back to the womb chakra in Australia. So it allows the mineral kingdom very clear connection globe-wide. And that's one thing that's fun about my collection of skulls. They have come from all the continents on Earth, from all over the world, and they're all connected to their own particular mineral stone families and formations, quote unquote, back home where they came from, so that everything that they experience as a mineral goes back into their communities also as a frequency.
And so there's a lot of people who also recognize the healing powers within the certain crystals. And you get crystal bowls that got made out of the different gemstones that create a certain frequency when played. So when you're doing sound and music together with a frequency of the type of crystal or stone or mineral that is, it creates certain activations in your chakras, in the body. It can activate certain areas in the body. And so also I've noticed, and you're very, very well versed with working with healing stones. And Donna's got a really, really powerful gift of working with jewelry. And I'll get you to explain how that works, because not all jewelry does work. And so it's good to have an understanding about how to work with certain gemstones for healing and for opening up certain parts of the body.
Right. Well, I used to be a healer for many long years, and I also used to have classes on the internet. And I came to a time in my life where it was appropriate for me to retire from those kinds of connections and heal myself. And actually, that time has been longer than I thought it would be. It's probably been roughly 9 years, something like that. since I've really taught classes or been out there in the public view. And during this time, I've gone through really serious illness and out the other side. I'm happy to say I'm quite healthy. And part of my journey has been using gems and stones in a way of medicine. And so this is different now than using jewelry for beauty. So I believe that the reason that we use jewelry as we do today as a culture is because we have forgotten our wisdom. So when I work with gems or minerals as jewelry, it's very important that these gems and minerals have not been heated or radiated or melted or all the different or dyed, all the different things that are now happening when gems are mined and sold as jewelry. I look for completely untreated stones, and I've developed a relationship with mines and with gemologists that have these. And then when I work with them, I don't include any metal unless I might put a few tiny little beads of pure gold into, say, a necklace or into a clasp, but no other metal such as silver or any other metal, because the metal frequencies can conflict with the stones. Necklaces are particularly powerful because you're actually wrapping gems around your spinal column, and you're creating a tube of light with the gems that each one has its own healing properties, both through color and from the way its crystals are formed. And they make a huge difference in your health. And this is mentioned throughout ancient texts as well as more recent ones. And it's been quite a journey learning how to work with gems and gemstones and seeing the incredible power that gems and gemstones can have when they're worked with properly, with an intention to call upon them as healers.
I know that when I was staying with Dawn, when I went down to see the crystal skulls down there, Dawn was explaining this to me because I never really took that much notice. I was wearing, crystal pendants and felt the effects of those. But when Dawn explained to me how these other gemstones work when you wear them around your neck and it's touching the spine and it creates light going down. Also, if it's hanging down to down the front onto your heart chakra area, how it can activate and send light and energy down through the body for healing and activating. And so she offered to, if I bought the different gemstones that I felt would help, that I was drawn to, and I was very, very drawn strongly to malachite. She let me try on some of hers just to see what if I could feel the difference or feel the frequency. And I really could feel the frequencies. And I was very, very drawn to her malachite one. And she said that she still had quite a few of the malachite stones. I tend to want to wear that every day. It just calls to me every day to wear it. And can you explain to me what malachite does again?
Well, this is interesting because honestly, most of the malachite pendants and necklaces out there cause disharmony in the body because people are no longer conscious and they don't remember how to work with stones properly. And in order to be able to make malachite necklaces, I generally buy between 3 and 4 strands, excuse me, that I shop for very carefully. And what sets these particular strands apart is that I'm searching for beads that have the bands of minerals and colors exactly at 90 degrees to the necklace stringing, so that they create a rhythmic pulse that goes around the strand and continues, so that when you're wearing it, it's something like rhythms of goosebumps going through your nervous system. Most malachite is not cut that way and can actually cause disharmony because it has such a strong impact on the body that if it's not aligned and the waves become chaotic and fight with each other, then it can create disharmony in the body. So the malachite is a green stone. It contains copper, and it works with the blood, with cleaning the blood. It works with healing the entire body because the green frequency does that. Mm-hmm. It goes actually into all the organs of the body, the liver, the gallbladder, the spleen, all the different organs. And actually cleanses them, cleans them, and aligns them. It also helps the kidneys become more powerful and to cleanse, and the adrenal system to relax. So it's a highly, highly powerful gem. And I remember getting a pendant once years ago that actually made me feel all the time very nauseated. And I went back to the jeweler that sold it to me and I said, I feel very sick when I wear this. And the jeweler said, oh, just keep wearing it every day. You'll eventually get used to it. I can remember working myself up to where I could wear it 4 hours at a time before I wanted to vomit. And now I look back and I realize truly the jeweler didn't know what he was talking about. It was actually very bad for me to wear that gem. My body was nauseous because the way the gem had been cut and set, it was causing chaos within my cells. So once you start to realize the power of healing gemstones and have a respect for them and begin to learn about them and create pieces of jewelry that are worn primarily as medicine, everything about how they interact with your cells changes.
Right, so no wonder I'm drawn to wear that all the time. You know, the thing is that as we become more conscious and more aware as a sentient being, we need to make the right decisions and pick the right stones that are going to work harmoniously with us. And so people like Dawn, who has a complete understanding how important it is to have the right way of the strands that go within the crystal itself, the way that, like you're saying, at a 90-degree angle, which creates harmony and a flow of energy instead of discordance and chaotic. These are the sort of people that you have to seek out when you want to start working with healing gems. We all know that we can hang on to certain rocks and things like that, but now we need to start researching about what type of stones that we're drawn to, and the ones that really have the healing energies and not just chaotically being cut with unconscious beings. So it's really, really important that we know that. So Dawn, are you going to be doing that for people at all? I know that my family all wanting to start put up their hands and saying they're all drawn to want to wear these because they've tried on the ones that Dawn's made for me and realised the potency and the healing powers of these necklaces.
Well, you know, as I mentioned, I've gone through my healing process that's taken a number of years, and I can feel the draw in so many ways to come back and begin to now offer things to other people. So I don't currently have a website, but I am going to be creating one. And if you feel drawn to work with me or communicate with me, you are welcome to email me. And here's my email. This is my private email. And it's my name, which is DAWNMAZ, as in zebra, UR, at me, that's me.com. So again, that's Dawn Mazer at me.com. And I promise I will get a website up. Strangely, I'm so moved to work with these that I now have actually hundreds of gem necklaces. I know I don't have that many necks. I can't wear them all. And they're not all for me because many of them are not for what I need now. Today I'm wearing completely natural, untreated Burmese sapphire, which awakens dormant parts of the brain. And since I've had head injury, this is a stone that's very helpful to me because I am at the tail end of healing serious damage to my brain and skull. And I'm also wearing Savartsite, which is a type of a green garnet that puts its green energy throughout the body, but has a different crystalline structure than malachite. So it's good for physical healing throughout the body. And then I'm also wearing a 40-million-year-old type of amber that's a beautiful spring green color around my neck because it puts the same green frequency throughout my cells along with the frequency of ancient trees that made this amber so long ago and recorded their story in a different time and place on Earth. So I vary my necklaces from day to day, but I use my own medicine, and it's very important. Rarely do I leave the house without wearing some gem medicine.
Right, and so can you explain to me what I'm wearing again on this one?
Well, this is one that, okay, so too bad we don't have a video. Debbie is wearing a type of quartz that has small titanium, I beg your pardon, fibers in it, filaments. And it's known as rutilated quartz. The particular one she's wearing varies from a brass color to a deep copper color in the rutilations. The quartz itself is clear as champagne glass. And in between, she had sabricite. So what this does, it draws lots of energy into her field, giving her a very strong arc field that's very thick and very difficult for strange energies to penetrate unless she wants them to. At the same time, the green frequency of the sabricite is going throughout all her cells and strengthening her physical body and all her organs.
I know that when I wear this combination, I just feel so more empowered, but I feel very protected. I can feel my frequency and I can feel my auric field really large. And I do. I feel vibrant. My mind is I've got more clarity, and I feel I've got a lot more strength in my body. So I know that these things, that these crystals and these stones, and that you understand how they work together. Dawn, you work with it such a very high frequency, and also Dawn understanding, knowing what these do, also puts in her higher intent, knowing what these do. And so she does these with love, with beautiful, loving energy, and with such ease. I watched her make these, actually, when I was staying there. She made them so beautifully and so quickly, and so she's got it down to an absolute art. So anyway, so if anybody has any questions or has any concerns, she has given her her private email, so she can always answer any questions. She may even be able to send you a picture through your email of some of the necklaces that do have the healing ability, so that you can actually see them for yourself. So anyway, let's move on from the gemstones. And I just want to acknowledge all those wonderful, beautiful beings that came up to me at Andrew's workshop and connected with me and thanked me for directing them and opening their minds up and their consciousness up to the crystal skulls, because a lot of them were saying that they were never really interested in crystal skulls until they understood what they were, what the type of work they were there for. And Andrew and I did a show on a video talking about how to work with crystal skulls and how much they are a consciousness and they're here to work with us. And so they're not for everybody, but if you're drawn to do something like that, that would be amazing. For you to go on to into maybe to some trade shows where they're selling crystals, or go on to eBay or Etsy that show those, and just tune into your own knowingness. But what I'd like to do now is I would like to open up this show for any callers who would like to share their experiences or have any questions, and you can do this by calling 956-217 0261 956-217 0261, or Skype Laura Lee Solomon. You can get her on Skype, Laura Laura Lee Lee Solomon. So so she can connect you, and that way we can do it. She can direct your calls to us through the website. So if anybody would like to share their experiences or would like to have any questions in regards to the crystal skulls or the beads, the necklaces, we're opening that up for people to do that. So Laura Lee Solomon, sorry, she just showed me, is all one word. Laura Lee Solomon, one word, on Skype.
Right, with no spaces.
No spaces.
Right. So, as we're waiting for our first caller, it might be interesting for me to just say,
yes,
for 1 second, in case any of you come to this place. About maybe 9 months ago, I was moved to begin to carve skulls, and I picked a stone, sodalite, that's fairly soft, but also can be polished to a high luster, and I did a rough carving using a small Dremel tool, and I knew I was going to be moving, and I wouldn't maybe have time to complete it, but the being that was going to be in the skull moved in. I could feel somebody in there, and he couldn't see because the skull didn't have eyes. So I grabbed a pencil and I drew eyes onto the skull, And he actually traveled with me a little, and other people met him. And I would have all my beautiful skulls with me, not all of them, but whoever wanted to come to an event. And then I would have this little humble sodalite skull. And people always wanted to reach for him and were telling me how powerful he was. And I got out my Dremel tools and I finished him just for this event so that he would have eyes and he could come. He needs a final polish. But it's interesting. I've had a number of people very attracted to this particular skull that I carved. It looks pretty good for a first carving, I must say.
I'm
not
impressed.
Perfect, but pretty good.
No, it's a beautiful blue, a really deep ink. What you'd call that?
It's like blue jeans blue.
Yeah, it's a violet blue almost, ultraviolet blue, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And you've done an amazing carving in there. And I know that when we were down at the Crystal Skull workshop or the weekend, and it was still just a stone and
with eyes drawn on it.
With eyes. The woman there who was introducing the famous Crystal Skull, she pointed at this blue stone. Do you have a name for him?
No, he doesn't have it. Well, I was going to call him Lightning, and I'm not sure if he likes that name yet. I don't, as I say, I don't have clairaudience, so I can't hear.
Right.
But I can get a feeling for what it does to the energy, and he may stay with the name Lightning. We'll see how that goes, if he likes it.
Well, you've done an amazing carving job. It doesn't look any different to the ones that are already carved there. It's an incredible job that you've done. And the frequency that's coming from that is really awesome as well. So it's wonderful sometimes if you do see a rock or a stone and you recognize it as some sort of entity, whether it's a crystal skull or whether it takes the shape of an animal form. I know that when I was down there visiting you, we were walking along the beach and all of a sudden there was a wave came in and washed out. And I looked down and I saw this stone and it's already got sort of semi-eyes into it, but it looks like a crystal skull. And I was just drawn to it and it just basically called to me. So it's with me now. I don't have any draw to sort of carve it because I don't have any tools to actually carve out this eye. But anyway, I just really feel the frequency and he just is really in harmony with the crystal skulls and the type of energies that I'm working with right now. So anyway, I just, anybody there who had any experiences with Dawn and her crystal skulls, did mention to me, there's a group of people who did mention to me the time and the experiences that they had and what they experienced putting their crystal skulls with you. So we're going to add.
See you soon.
Hi, so welcome back to Charting Your Course with Dawn Mazer and myself, Debbie Smart. I'm going to now bring in Laura Lee Solomon. She has a question for Dawn.
Yes, I've been working on the idea of a gemstone necklace, and I have a strand of about 47 black tourmaline beads. They are 8mm beads, and I wanted to know what your thought was on a good gemstone to use to complement them, to have both a high vibration and to be grounded.
Gosh, Laura Lee, there are so many. Do you know what direction you'd like to go? There are stones that can guide you into higher consciousness and allow you to contact some of your own bodies in many other realms, which I know you do already, but can enhance that. There are stones that can clear your cells. There are stones that can heal your organs. Do you have any sense of what direction you'd like to go?
I think I'd like to work on doing physical clearing in this world and being able to hold a high frequency while remaining grounding. I've always had one central weakness, and in my astrological chart, it's exemplified by Sun square Neptune, and that could lead one to be like an alcoholic or a drug addict or something. But in my case, it works with a tendency to get ungrounded and go play in the astral playgrounds, doing fantasy, which isn't too helpful.
Right. So that's why tourmaline's wonderful, because it grounds you.
Yeah, that's why I got the tourmaline. I just wanted.
Right. No, I understand.
Yeah.
So tourmaline's a very hard stone, and if you start doing these for yourself, which is easy to do, It's really good to look up the Mohs hardness of any stones you decide to put together. So we want to look only pretty much at hard stones to work with it. So there are a lot of choices. One good one would be ruby. And you might think ruby is horrendously expensive. I was very surprised to find that I can find very good untreated beads of gem quality if I do careful looking online. And what you're looking for is you're looking for what is called rondelles, or else round beads, which in the case of ruby is likely to be too expensive. But rondelles are sort of like a squashed ball, so to speak. And the reason that you keep that soft round shape rather than cutting like you would normally see rubies cut, you don't want sharp focuses of light stabbing into your body, because in this case the cells will actually put up resistance to the frequency, and they won't allow it in to allow it to heal. So you want a soft light coming out from all around the gem. So you look for an unfaceted roundel, and you look for untreated. Rubies would normally be heated, melted, and have be put in an oven with cesium gas and possibly even irradiated, which completely destroys any healing power they have. So you would look for a quality ruby that you can kind of see through, one that has a beautiful deep red color, and one that has almost a glow from the inside of the beads. And since I do a lot of my shopping online, I found that you can see this through being online. So that would be a good one. And rubies are better if you have a small amount of carats that you wear at one time. So you'd want them to be smaller than your 8 millimeters. Anything from 4 millimeters to 5 millimeters would be perfect. You might think that's a fortune, but you could probably get an entire strand for under $500 of pretty good rubies in a roundel shape. That would be grounding. If you wanted to enhance your ability to think clearly and be able to keep your brain very connected and very sobered up and very clear, then you could look for the blue stones. So hard blued stones would be something like my Burmese blue sapphire, which are roundels. Again, you don't want that sharp, sparkly gem look that is so popular today, because that would not be a good gem for a healing stone. Tanzanite would work. That's a beautiful lavender blue stone. It is heated, but it's not irradiated or it doesn't have poison gas put with it. It's just heat. And again, you'd want a roundel. Tanzanite can be a little bit, can shatter. So you want to, when you're making your own jewelry, you want to put these on nylon beading thread. And you want to learn how to knot. You can actually go onto YouTube and look up how to knot a pearl necklace. And that's the same knots that you put between your beads. So if you did tanzanite, you definitely want a knot on each side of each tanzanite bead to prevent it from sort of clicking against the other beads next to it. So those are kind of ideas. You could put emerald. Emerald's a hard stone. And that's very healing for everything. It's another green stone with a beautiful color that's healing for the whole body. But with everything you described, I would guess ruby for grounding, or the blue sapphire for mental clarity.
Okay. That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
You know, one of the things I've noticed working with therapeutic gems is that some of the best and the least expensive stones come from India. And usually they're hand drilled and handmade, and all the beads are a slightly different shape, which is lovely. But when you get them, they all have to be re-drilled to be large enough to put a nylon beading thread rather than a wire through them. They often come strung on a thin wire. You don't really want a steel wire running through the beads around your neck, because it creates a steel circuit, a metallic circuit around your spinal cord, which isn't a good thing. So I use a tiny Dremel and tiny little diamond bits to enlarge the holes on most of the gems I get. Sometimes gems from China have a bigger hole and is more evenly cut, but I find that it's very difficult to get untreated gems of any type from China. They seem to have fallen in love with the idea of torturing most of their gems to make them fit our idea of beauty. And once you dye or heat or put weird chemicals on gems or radiate the heck out of them with radiation, they lose most of their healing properties. You really don't want to wear them.
Okay. Thank you very much for that information.
Yeah, thanks for that question.
So, Dawn, I just had another question for you. We were talking earlier about some of the ways that you've been working with your crystal skulls too, and one of the ways that you're working with them was in dream time, and I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing how you did that.
Okay. Well, when I got my first skull, Emery, who is carved by this famous carver in Brazil, I couldn't hear him talk. Many people can hear their skulls talk, and I couldn't do that because I'm not clairaudient at this time. But I still had this overwhelming feeling of love for him, and it was definitely reflected back. So I would fall asleep with him, and I found myself for the first perhaps 3 to 4 months that soon, about 2 months after getting Emery, I got my next skull, and then my next skull. And I found these showing up in dream time, and I would spend my dream time evenings holding one skull after another in my hands and focusing on them until I could cause them to change color. And then I would end up setting that skull down in my dream time, and I'd pick up the next skull and focus on it until it could change color. So I believe that the skulls led me to beginning to learn to work with stones, perhaps in the way that ancient, more conscious peoples did, the ones that created temples and so on, because I believe, for example, a lot of the stelas and things that you can find in the Copan Library, stone library, that's being unearthed by archaeologists. A lot of the things that you find there, I don't believe they were carved with carving tools. I think it was done at a time when I'm going to say we, because I believe many of us are from that time. We're just in new human bodies, when we could use our minds to shape stone. And so these skulls led me into a period of time lasting many months, where all night long in the dream world, they were working with me and I was working with them to learn to shape stone and learn to color stone with my mind.
Right, so did you also, when you were learning that, did you pick up the different frequencies with the different colors from them, or anything else like that? Or
boy, I'm telling you, it was hard work. I had to focus and concentrate with such intention. I'd actually wake up somewhat exhausted, feeling like I'd worked really hard that night, which I had. I worked to focus my consciousness and work with the mineral kingdom. And the different skulls that I had would come to me, and each one would work with me so that I could learn their wisdom, and they would help me practice this skill. And I would know which skull it was that I was working with. I know them all by their frequency, and not just their color. I can feel them. And when they, I use the word talk. Of course, I can't hear, as I've said. But when they talk to me, which means I'll suddenly realize that one of them wants my attention. And as I look at it, I'll get a very strong thought impression of what it wants, whether it wants to travel, or it needs to sit in the sun, or it wants to, perhaps I'll have someone over at my house, and that skull will recognize that that person needs its help. And it will let me know that it needs to sit with them for a while. One skull even at one time asked to go home with somebody for about a month and work with that person. So they definitely have their own personalities and can make themselves quote unquote heard, even though I can't hear them with their voices.
yeah, it's just amazing how they do work with us. And my granddaughter is very, very attached to him, and there's at time periods where she, asks permission if she can have him stay over at her house, and she puts him on the headboard of her bed, and she has the most amazing experiences and dreams with him. And she shared with me not so long ago at a full moon that we had on the was the summer solstice. She actually took him outside and stood under the moon and was holding him in the palms of her hand. And she said the next minute she saw this golden beam coming down from the moon directly into Himshi, and then from Himshi it went into her body. And she said she could feel it altering all the cellular structure in her body. And she said she became so dizzy and lightheaded that finally, she was holding on for as much as she could for this download. And then she finally said she just had to go inside and lay down because she could feel her whole body was changing.
There are some crystals that are so beautiful, and if you put them in the sun, it will fade their color. And citrine is a really good example, and so is
the amethyst.
Amethyst, and also rose quartz. They can actually become very dull and dingy in the sun. They love to sit out under the moon. So that's another thing. If you get a skull to try to get a feeling. And this might be a good moment to just mention, if there's somebody out there that would like to try this and you get a skull and you can't hear anything like me, how do you know what the skull wants if you feel it wants something? And I sort of have a binary code. I will get an idea or an impression of what the topic that might be, and I'll, in my mind, ask the skull if my understanding of the topic is correct. And I sort of have a way that I recognize the frequency either getting lighter or heavier. If it's lighter, it's a yes. If it's heavier, it's a no. So I have kind of a binary code. So even though I don't have really good clairaudience, I can pick up general thoughts, and then I can reflect them back to the consciousness of the skull and ask if I understood properly. And that's actually how I've named mine as well, since I haven't had them clearly communicate their names to me in most cases. I might get a general idea for a name, and I'll ask the skull, and the energy will get lighter or it'll get a lot heavier.
It's just really interesting how it does communicate with you. And I know that a lot of people, it just depending on how open you are to recognize that it's coming from them and it's not just coming from yourself, because it's the same with the type of work that I do with my regression work. Some people say because they've not really ever been in contact with listening to that inner voice and trusting that inner voice that comes through. And so, they say to me, well, how do you recognize the messages that are coming from, say, Himshi, when he's sending me things, and how do I differentiate it from my own thought process? When it comes to me, I know when I'm putting a thought together. And I know when I'm controlling a thought, and I know thoughts do flow through a lot easier and stuff, but it just comes from what I call left field. It's a thought that, you're thinking along one thing, and next minute this other thought just comes in and goes whammo, and you know that it's a higher consciousness thought. It's not just a stream from a radio or, that's going into the radio waves. There are television waves and microwaves that are flowing through. These are really high thoughts that come through and come through with ideas. And so I know even with Seraphina, when she came to me in my dream state and she gave me her name, it was so clear. But other times when these little thoughts come through from the different, the other different stones that I have and my other skull, Numi, it's a totally different feeling of what comes through from the different skulls. So you recognize exactly which skulls have got which frequency they're talking to you from.
I'm glad you said that, because when you were down visiting in order to go to the skull conference, Himshi addressed me and talked to me, and I absolutely knew it was him, and I could hear language. So it's possible the skulls that are attracted to me right now, they just are not speaking colloquial English.
Right. But they're coming through as a frequency and imprinting it somewhere in your consciousness, and that you are picking up on it.
As a general thought. Yeah, yes, right. Yeah.
Because, it's not always 100% clear that we're getting from everything. I also had there was a guy that dropped by. I was at a friend's place, and he was on his way to Tucson to go and sell some of his crystals that he had. And so he decided he wanted to drop in and show us as a group what he had, and if any of us were interested in any of his rocks and stones and whatever. And I thought to myself, well, I've really got so many. I don't really feel like I was really open to buying anything. And he laid out this huge, and you've seen it in the studio.
Oh yes,
yeah,
that's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, and I just all of a sudden recognized these purple stone, and I'm thinking, what is that?
See, purple? He's green. Fluorite.
Oh, fluorite. Yeah, it's got bits of purple and green.
Oh, right,
and
right.
all different colours through it. And I'm looking, and I thought, oh my God, that's a crystal skull. And I thought, and it was so strong. It was like, you need me, I'm coming to you. It had like, it's got the deep voice. It's really funny, you know.
Very masculine.
It's a very, very masculine energy. But I knew that where it wanted to be, and it wanted to be in my studio.
So I just want to make this really clear. This is one of those rocks that is uncarved by human hands. It naturally looks like a skull. It believes that it is a skull, and it has a very powerful consciousness that has taken up that particular mineral as its home, as its body. And this one is really powerful. And it definitely resembles a human skull, but it's not quite.
It's more square. It's all square. Isn't
Yeah.
it? It's not rounded like a skull is, but you can recognise the jaw is really solid. It's just an amazing being, actually. And I know that I've got work to do with that further down. At the moment, it's like a real sentinel holding space in my studio right now, where Dawn is actually staying right now.
Right, in the moment.
In the moment, yes.
You know, and this brings up something regarding where I'm staying. You know, after the conference this last weekend, I was lucky enough to be able to work with a healer that's a world-renowned healer. And he was prescribing stone elixirs or gem elixirs to some, not all, of the people that were on his table. Maybe 1 out of every 5 people got a gem elixir prescribed. And, you know, I began working with gem elixirs about 3 or 4 years ago when I had fibromyalgia. And I was looking for a way to be able to have a fluid body that could move again. I had been ill and in bed for quite a while. And so my body had kind of locked up and it hurt. And I first learned about aquamarine. And I began using aquamarine water. And aquamarine water is known as a type of gem elixir which takes away arthritic pains and sore joints. So another way to work with these gems and minerals is, instead of wearing a necklace around as a circle around your spinal column, or having a skull, is to actually take a stone. It could be a bead or it could be a rough stone, and put it in water and start drinking water with that stone in it. And you know, if you're moved to do that, this is a very old and very respected form of healing.
Yes, and I remember him saying, and he did that with my granddaughter too. He just said what came to him was that she needed to put ruby into a jar. She put into a mason jar of water. You can put it into a jug, and let it sit there for like 12 hours, I think it was it, or 24 hours? I can't remember, or overnight. Leave it overnight, and then drink it the next day, and just keep filling it up with water and letting it sit for 12 hours, and then drink it. And the different frequencies that'll do, it'll bring in the light frequencies directly into your body, into your system, and rejuvenate or heal, or wherever there is a low frequency in your body, it will charge that. So it's really powerful.
You know, since the title of this is not Crystal Skulls, but working with the mineral kingdom, might be a moment to mention that one way you can work with crystals is to take a crystal and actually break off the end. So people don't like the idea of breaking a crystal, and I don't either until I saw this done, but there are a number of small, tiny, thin crystals that are sold inexpensively. And you can actually break off the base, and it will always communicate with the rest of the crystal. So it's one way to go out and, for example, maybe you want to make a tool of protection for yourself or a grid by placing it in a tree, and you can keep the broken end with you, and it will always resonate with what that tree is doing. So that's another way to work with the mineral crystal. I'm not sure I explained that correctly.
Yes, you did. And I noticed that, you know, sometimes when on my sacred journeys, a lot of people would bring crystals or stones from their land, and they would place it into these sacred places. They'd bury it in the ground so that they could keep a connection, an open communication or a connection with these sacred places, and tune into the frequencies that are there. So there's so many different ways to work with the mineral kingdom and access that. So we're going to be getting close to finishing our show. So Dawn, if you'd like to give people your email once again, if anybody would have any questions in regards to your beadwork or your healing stones.
Well, I'm going to start working on a website, but frankly, I didn't know I was going to be on this show until just about an hour before it started. So here I am, not quite ready for everybody to find me, but you can find me easily through my email, which is my name, DAWNMAZ as in zebra, UR @me.com. That's Dawn Mazer @me.com.
And so Andrew will still be doing his Monday show tomorrow, Adventures into Reality, and you can listen to him with Pacific Standard Time from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can also contact him for a reading. He's open to take readings now again, appointments for readings, and you can do that through Tanosh at galactichistorian.com, or you can also connect if you want any